let's see here. Let's see. Okay, cool. So I think we're all here if we're ready to get started.
Sure. Can we go over our topics real quick, and I can type them into the chat?
Yes, just a second. Let me pull up my agenda. Just a sec. So we wanted to start with public health giving us an update, and Colleen talking through reopening county facilities and county buildings, and us going through that protocol of creating a business plan to reopen. Is that correct, Colleen?
Yes.
Okay, so you have the floor and you can take it away.
Great. So I know is there really only 9 of us on here? Are there folks on the phone that I'm not aware of?
It does not look like it.
Okay, I was just going to share that obviously looking to see who's actually on here. You've heard everything that we've been talking about, in multiple meetings just this week alone. And, a big piece of the puzzle is, as a county, we have to figure out how we are going to feel that we're opening, in a safe way as well. And it's like a phased in kind of opening piece. And so with that being said, I think it makes sense to have our county as well as our city and our nonprofits do the same exact, use the social distancing protocol. And then when you look at that, there are pieces that you can say, don't apply to you, but basically it truly is an outline. I know this morning on our business meeting, someone had shared very generously that, it's 5 pages, but for most of us, there's only going to be like 3 of those pages that really apply to what we're trying to accomplish. And I think it's important that we are filling out the same exact thing that we're, asking our community partners and our, businesses to fill out, so that there isn't an opportunity for folks to be like, oh, well, you didn't do it, why do I have to do it? Versus, no, we actually are all looking at the same exact thing. We're processing it all, in the same way. Obviously, things are case by case. And I think that would just be really helpful for us. And like I said, for most of our county departments, it's truly going through a checklist, being like, nope, I have that in place. This is how I'm doing it. And it kind of helps you frame out if you need to do any additional policies and procedures of how you want to move forward. Because my vision truly is for the county, and I had a staff meeting today, is that, as much as we can stay virtual, that's kind of going to be our way that we're going to be operating. We're still going to, keep our door locked. We're still going to have people ring in. Like, this isn't open the doors wide open and business back to usual. It's truly like, how do we do this as best as we can moving forward into, as you guys all know, the new normal. And so I think those are important pieces to recognize. I also think, and so with that being said, Beth, of course, has generously already drafted letters that we can send out with all the information and the directions for people to do that and start submitting. My staff is prepared to take on some of those pieces. I did get permission to increase with funding that, of course, we just got for COVID-19 to have an additional 10 hours of one of my staff members dedicated to working through these social distancing protocols. But I think it's important that we have an opportunity before June 1st to really look at how we want to operate and what really makes sense. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily, just because everyone can, possibly physically come back in the office, that wouldn't be my recommendation. It would still be what can truly get done virtual. I mean, I have some staff that is very comfortable at this point in time, because we are staggering who goes in and who doesn't. And so everyone has an opportunity, almost everyone, I should say, has an opportunity to work from home. And so that's been a really successful model for us. So I think my question slash, does that sound appropriate, is to send these out so people can start thinking about them. Obviously, that we're not going to prioritize them, as we are still trying to get businesses out. And to making sure that we're being responsive to the business protocols, but we are going to, look at others. Can you please do that, Elspeth? Thank you. And so that we are looking to, unify this, across the county, that everyone who is reopening is following these social distancing protocols. That makes sense. So that's kind of, where I'm at with that. And if, the commissioners feels like, hey, that sounds reasonable, it's not necessarily like, hey, a hard decision, but hey, keep proceeding that way, because that has been part of the conversation. I think, that's something that we can just weigh in on right now so that we can push this and get this rolling.
I think that sounds reasonable, Colleen, and it sounds like you're expecting each department or office to develop their own. And so I might suspect that we have, the question came up at one point on fingerprinting, and then, DMV, and there might be a couple areas where we can have appointments that may be necessary for in-person interaction, or in-person public interactions. So I'm definitely okay with that. And I think too, with the teleworking agreements that have developed, I don't think that this should be a surprise to folks.
Yeah, and I think what's really helpful is that as you step through that protocol, it will bring up questions like, oh, I didn't think of that. Oh, or hey, I totally have that. And then, that also helps us communicating effectively across all of our staffs, what that plan is. I know that, it's going to look different from every department. I did have a one-on-one call earlier with Tanner from the library, because obviously the way they operate is going to be so much different than a lot of the courthouse offices, operate. And so I do think it's important. And I think some of those questions will come to light, or like, oh, I didn't think of that. And yes, let's work with you. Let's take that time to make sure that we feel confident that we're doing this well. And because it's still like staggered and phased in, if you will. So, and I think, just talking to some folks, offline, that it does feel right in that respect of like everyone's, responsible for filling that out. So there isn't, well, the county didn't do it, why do I have to do it kind of piece? Like, we're just alleviating. We're not even gonna that's not even gonna be an issue. So if that makes sense. So that's kind of where we're at. With
What
that,
is your,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
do you have a ideal time frame that you anticipate either having some more time to review that by your fellow departments and offices?
Yeah, I think, folks, and we can talk more about that specifically at the director and elected officials meeting tomorrow, to kind of set what we think is a reasonable timeline for folks to turn it in, because we'll need some, time to look at it. And I think hopefully it should be pretty straightforward, not complicated, because like, even doing the business protocol ones, the ones that are pretty straightforward, literally they have a physical door that they open, were so much easier to go through than the ones that have, like, are multifaceted, if you will, and are asking for crowds to come in, versus like, hey, you only have a certain amount of space, you only can fit a certain amount of people in there safely. I think another piece of that is, even talking with the business today, I think this would have to come up in the director elected officials meeting as well, is that I really feel strongly that we have to put a policy in place for the county government that requires, all employees who interact with the public to have a face covering on, and as well as asking our public to have a face covering when they come in, and have the ability to tell folks no. And I think that was kind of the push I talked on the business meeting, like the more that we feel as a community that we are comfortable with that language, and that's kind of our new normal, at least for the next couple of months, the better it is for anyone coming in, into our community. And I think that was part of the conversation around, like, what does it mean to come into Lake County safely? And I think, wearing a face covering is something that we, should be holding people to. And so, for example, for those who weren't on the meeting, like right now in public health, we literally put up a sign that said, we kind of fell on that theme of, no shirt, no shoes, no mask, no service, kind of a piece. So people start to be like, oh, that makes sense. And, and if you want to interact with us, like, let's do it safely. Because as we know, that face covering is to protect, like, the other person, not the person necessarily wearing it. But if we're all wearing it, then we're protecting each other. Right. Also, I think that would be helpful to fall back on, to have that as, part of our policies as we're moving into this new norm, that would be the requirement, if you will. So there isn't a can I not. Okay.
Sounds good. Hold on just a second, Colleen, let me pull this up here.
No, it's all good. And I will share, for those like the business meeting I thought went really well. I think we got some good feedback on some things that we can be improving. And yeah, I think it went well overall. Like I think the opportunity for folks to have a forum to ask questions has been really successful from us. Like city council, as many of you were on that last night, that went on for a long time. We had a lot of folks that ended up, like, I felt like it became the public health questionnaire. Like it almost became like a public health town hall versus like a city council meeting. But I felt that, some of those folks were on that call today and they weren't as vocal in the sense of, feeling that they probably had, their needs met last night and only had a few follow-ups. So that felt good. And we do have our town hall tonight as well at 6 o'clock. So our community meeting where folks can continue to come in and, sorry, I have a child who's dancing on the other side of my computer trying to make me laugh. It's been very successful. And so anyway, so that's where we're at.
Colleen? I guess I've been thinking about how to open up the building and land use department, but should that not be a coordinated effort throughout the county building?
Yes, I want it to be a coordinated effort, but I think you have to figure out what's like everybody's space is different. So
right.
Are you suggesting like, hey, the courthouse submits their social distancing protocol as one?
Well, I actually, it seems to me that all of the departments that are in the courthouse submit one, and then somebody else needs to coordinate it and actually say, well, if the assessor has a customer coming in, and then the treasurer has, recorder has 2 or 3, and we've got one, and public and recreation has one. Lori has one. That could wind up being quite a few people in the building.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Paul. And I hadn't thought of that in that respect, but that would mean an effort on all of the courthouse departments coming together and agreeing on what that looks like. I know that, and I know Miguel's on here. And can you please? Sorry. Oh, okay. Apparently, okay.
Okay.
But so my point is that, yes, that might be a great, excuse me, that might be a really great idea, but then you have to bring everyone together. Like I was going to point out Miguel talking about, I believe he got what they're calling sneeze guards, like the plywood things. I know Raj is working on that. And if that's how everyone wants to universally, sorry, if anyone wants to universally, do those pieces, and you guys are all, and that feels comfortable too, right? That it's not a hodgepodge, kind of to your point, Paul, of like, well, here we don't have a sneeze guard, so you all have to have a mask, but here we do, and vice versa, and everything else.
I do agree with Paul because we're all on the same floor. A lot of us are on the same floor, or even if they're downstairs, it's going to be hard to manage that people just only enter the outside perimeter of the building, but then don't wander or are just going to do their business in one department and not lingering in the halls or visiting. And so I think that it is really important that we all have, or I guess my question would be like, how do we enforce any rules? And ideally we would all have that same understanding or the same rules in place, whether it be face guards or limited numbers, but how do we ensure that, we're enforcing that request, or that request is being honored?
Yeah, I think all good questions that I think, putting everyone's heads together, where are we comfortable with, where, that we do have that unified message and how we're going to handle things as well. I think that's something we all need to tackle. Not just like public health dictating by any means.
That sounds like a topic for tomorrow afternoon's meeting. Where can I get a copy of that business opening protocol?
So basically it's just almost like a checklist, but we can link you out to the form, and we can go from there. So after this, I'll make sure that I send that, or we can wait until tomorrow's meeting once we're kind of in agreement, because I have it all in a nice little letter ready to go out.
Okay.
You guys.
All right. However you want to do it.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Cool. Colleen, do you also wanted to, I think if we don't have any further questions on that, Colleen, I think you also wanted to talk through some support from us for Build a Generation.
Yes, so Katie Baldazar is on the line, and as we look at some of the funding pieces that are happening, you know, at the state level. So we have to recognize that currently for public health, you know, just over a third of our budget is grants to do the work that we do. And so there are major cuts happening at the state level that will affect all of us, including some of the pass-through grants that we have that Build Generation is currently doing as far as community work. And so I think what's really hard is the fact that, you know, they're looking at this health equity piece, and I'll let Katie speak to it, but, you know, some of our health equity grants, when it's almost ironic in the sense that we're in a pandemic and we're recognizing that, you know, there hasn't been equitable opportunities for a whole entire community, yet that's like, you know, and granted, they're looking to cut across many, many programs, but it's just, it's challenging. But I will let Katie speak to kind of what the need is to see if we have any influence to kind of push back up to the state level to be heard in the sense of like, hey, these pieces are not where the cuts need to happen in the sense of how our community is supported, and especially us, you know, being, you know, a rural community and not having, you know, resources where, you know, all of our programming is 100% supported through the county budget, through the general fund. Katie?
Yep. If it's okay, I'll share my screen really quick. Just because I put together a little, just to give you a little sense of what's going on. So here's what happened. I'm sure everybody's aware of where the state budget is right now. They are trying to plug a $3.3 billion shortfall. The JBC has been meeting. The legislature won't meet until, I think they go back May 25th. And will adopt the recommendations of the JBC. So the JBC has started making cuts. They've made some recommendations, but nothing is final yet. And we are getting hit disproportionately hard. I'll explain why that is. But I reached out to Millie Hamner and Christine Scanlon, just, you know, said, hey, do you have any advice? And they said, you know, it might help if your Board of County Commissioners was willing to write a letter of support for that work. That might have some influence on the Joint Budget Committee. Obviously, we are very lucky to have Julie McCluskey on that committee, and so what you guys, you know, what you all think does matter, I think, particularly to her. So yeah, request is we would love for you all to submit a letter of support to the JBC in support of particularly our work in health inequities. We're happy to write the letter. If you guys were okay with it, we would write it this week. You could review it independently and then give us any feedback at your Monday meeting, and then ideally approve it and sign it there. So right now where we're at, the Joint Budget Committee has voted to cut our health disparities grant program funding by almost 60%. It's exactly $264,211, a little over $250,000, to help plug that budget gap. I don't think it's that they don't, I honestly think they don't even really know what the program is. I don't think it's that they don't care about health equity, but the dollars are funded by Amendment 35, which is the tobacco tax. And there's a clause in the Constitution that allows them to take that funding and move it over to other health issues if they declare a budget emergency. And so it's particularly flexible funding, so it's sort of tempting to touch. The cut would impact 3 initiatives that we have. So our community organizing work in manufactured housing, our housing work, so work of the Housing Coalition, and then our work to help about 20 organizations in Lake County better support what we would call historically marginalized communities. So that can be young people, seniors, people of color, immigrants, Spanish speakers, all the folks that maybe aren't always included or historically haven't been in decision making. The impact, so without adequate funding, it's going to be harder for our community to complete the housing work that we've spent so much time building. And it's ironic, as Colleen said, because this work is more important than ever. Nonprofits have been, you know, as you guys know, we've released about $180,000. Overwhelmingly, the top need that people have is housing. So, you know, in 2015, we, well before the pandemic, we asked the community what their top issue was, and they said housing. And then the last couple of months, we've been asking, like, what's your most important issue? And people are saying housing. So that need continues. And this is the time for us to work on developing and building that affordable housing work. So when the economy picks back up, we're prepared. It's also harder for us to adequately support community members in manufactured housing and lift up the issues that they're having. And that's particularly hard as these issues are changing with the evolution of the COVID-19 crisis. Those are the community members who are least likely to have health insurance. They're least likely to qualify for free COVID testing. They're least likely to have sick leave. They're least likely, right? Like the list goes on. And these are the folks that we need to be talking to and understanding their issues and helping them lift those up, because this crisis could be a moment where we could say, hey, as a state, what if we had a Family Medical Leave Act? You know, what if we made sure that all of our communications from the state came out in English and Spanish? And then it's also an opportunity for our community to think about, you know, so that's sort of what I'm talking about, right? Like there's this great moment, this great opportunity for our community and our state to think about how do we better center historically marginalized communities. When any one of us in our community is doing better, we are all doing better. And you can see that if you go into a school classroom. Teachers, the whole class does better if all the kids have shown up and they are fed and they have their mental health needs taken care of and they have eyeglasses and they don't have cavities. And when half the kids are hungry and their teeth hurt and they can't see the board, the kids who don't have that issues, those issues, you know, don't get taught well. So we all do better when we think about equity. And why it matters. So I think we believe that it's really important, and you know, kind of said this already, but in the COVID-19 crisis, that we both address the immediate need, right? Like we are working, my staff is working incredibly hard right now to make sure that nobody in Lake County gets evicted this month. But longer term, we need to think about why is it that, you know, the people that are about to get evicted are the people who were on the edge before the crisis started. They were the people who were paying so much for housing that they didn't have savings to get them through a couple of months of not working. And why is that? And how do we make sure that we have affordable housing so that people aren't at such great risk when the next crisis hits? And then this is just a quote from Boo Lee. If advocacy organizations focused on changing laws to provide paid sick leave, increased wages, and health insurance had received more support to do their work, maybe so many millions of people wouldn't be suffering now. So that's the request. I'm happy to take questions, but we would really love for a letter of support. And I think, you know, our request to the legislature, we understand that everybody's facing cuts, but we're asking for, you know, could you cut our budget more like 30%? We think that would allow us to, you know, continue the work with only some minor issues, you know, inefficiencies. A cut of 60% or almost 60% is really devastating to the work. So that's what I have. Happy to take questions or comments or thoughts. And I can unshare now.
I'm Molly Toy.
Hi, Katie. This is Miguel. On your request, I've been doing something similar with trying to encourage the Board of County Commissioners and even my office staff to write letters about the senior exemption program.
Yep.
And I would like to ask your help with encouraging the people you speak with to include that piece in there if they're communicating with Julie McCluskey, since she does have a seat at the table there. That is a program for us that is around $200,000, but the dollar amount that isn't representative of the true impact to that section of the community, the seniors.
Yeah.
everybody over 65 or older, and they're all on fixed incomes. And so I was here in 2010 on staff working at the counter, and I told many people it was the worst time to work here. And it was because they pulled the rug from underneath these seniors' feet. And I'm fully anticipating that that's going to happen because it's happened in the past. And also now their discussion is including veterans and the veterans exemption there.
Yep.
That's a tough one because the people that qualify there have to be 100% disabled from the VA. So we're talking about people that have served the community and then also are 100% disabled. And luckily we only have about 5 of them. But since it's a statewide calculation, we're just thrown in with that mix. And so if we can't get, I'm not anticipating that they're not going to take that and defund it, but hopefully we can also do something locally to potentially backfill it ourselves, if nothing else, because when you talked about marginalized communities, they tend to be one that gets overlooked a little bit, and
Yep.
the impact is so huge. And I know firsthand because I was sitting there at the counter and you're seeing them cry and tell you the story about they're not going to either eat or they're going to have to ration their medication or go getting medication. And those are the options they have being on a fixed income.
I think that's such a great example, Miguel. That's exactly why advocacy matters, because the seniors and the veterans don't have lobbyists that are going down and talking to the JBC all day. And so we have to have community organizing, we have to have advocacy, because we have to lift up those voices now when we could make a difference, and say, oh, for heaven's sakes, you can think of another way to raise revenue than cutting the veteran exemption.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. So it sounds like we're looking for something that is a kind of a formal letter put together from the board to ask for revisions to the budget cuts happening at the state, right? Like you just like a formal letter from us to say,
Hey,
this is how.
Yeah, just to say this program matters in our community. Can you not cut it so deeply?
Cool. Sounds good. Sarah and Mark, what are your thoughts on us putting together or drafting a letter and signing it?
And Kayla, we're happy to draft the letter. We definitely know you guys have a lot on your plate and we don't want to put extra work on you. So if that's helpful, we're happy to draft it. But I think it makes a difference if it comes from you.
Okay. Cool. I definitely don't want to put us in a position where we're asking for one thing over another thing kind of thing, you know, if we have multiple letters going on. So, you know, asking for, like, as an example, I would just want it to be carefully worded so that it's not us saying, you know, this is more important than emergency TANF dollars or child welfare. You know, do you know what I mean?
Yep, no, I totally hear you. And I do think that's the risk of this. And I know you guys, I think, did do a letter for disaster TANF. And so, yes, we would be happy to write it in such a way that it isn't saying, it's saying, hey, we acknowledge, you know, I think our messaging so far has been, we acknowledge that everything's going to get cut here. You know, we're not asking, you know, we understand that you have impossible choices, and can we back off a little bit on the cuts?
Okay. Yeah, I think if you want to draft a letter and send it to us, we can definitely put it on our agenda on Monday to determine a formal action on it.
Great. Any other comments from commissioners right now or thoughts?
No, I'd be happy to entertain a letter too. And I think there's also a lot of other ways I'm curious how, you know, talking about kind of focusing and narrowing and really consolidating efforts. I'd love to see how we can explore other partnerships or narrowing focus on projects and tasks. One thing that comes to mind is the COG was recently, you know, Autumn came to us and asked about purchasing or a lease purchase agreement on an inn, and I'm making this giving this example in the housing realm, you know, and knowing that we've always kind of needed some more a better connection with human resources up in Lake County and the COG. But they are looking into a lease purchase to then potentially acquire and establish permanent supportive housing, which, you know, I think we have a few properties in Lake County that could be kind of pilot projects or opportunities for similar, perhaps, engagement. But
No, I think that's great, Sarah. And we are, just to be clear, I didn't really talk about this, but we are looking at all options. So, you know, we've already figured out like how could we narrow focus and get as much done as possible next year. If we do have these budget cuts, we signed on to a letter yesterday asking the legislature to entertain the possibility of looking at an emergency tax on top earners. I'm not asking you guys to support that, but that's something we signed on to. We're working with some policy advocacy organizations that have been looking into like what are the solutions to this budget cut, you know, these budget cuts, where could we raise more revenue? So we really are looking at kind of all options, and we would love to get a few more things. You know, the housing grant in particular was a 2-year grant. So we kind of teed everything up last year with the hope that like we would get a ton done this year and then be in a really good position for that work to move forward, either without us or with us in a more limited capacity. And we would love to be able to get as much done next year as possible.
yeah, I'd it's good to hear that those conversations have happened, and it'd be nice to see, you know, them happen with the city and the county, to see if we could be creative in further partnerships.
Yeah, we'll continue to talk with you. We're not given a lot of turnaround time. So we have to, you know, we hear from the grant officers on Monday and they say, hey, we need to know what you would cut by Wednesday. So it's not a super collaborative process because we don't have lots of time. And we can make budget change, you know, it's all sort of preliminary, it's projections, it's saying if this, then this, if this, then this. And in the meantime, we're trying to sort of have those conversations where we can and figure out, you know, and certainly once we know, figuring out. But yeah, if you have, and I would say if you have thoughts, Sarah, on, I know we're all busy right now, but if there's, you know, an openness to sitting down and having those conversations, we're certainly happy to have them. In addition to, you know, I mean, my theory right now is all strategies are good. So let's figure out how we could collaborate. Let's ask the legislature not to cut as much. Let's figure out if there are additional revenue sources, right? Like, let's just sort of look at all strategies. So happy to put together a meeting to have further discussion about collaboration if that's useful.
Great, thanks.
Katie, Paul. I guess I get so wrapped up here in my little world about how I can function, what kinds of things can I do to keep my operation functional. I get so lost in that I have to thank you for reminding me that there's a huge segment of our population out there that isn't getting the service that we're trying to give them. I not only thank you, but I have to tell you, I have to admit to the fact that I'm a little ashamed that my mind hasn't gone there. And so thank you for putting my mind in perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Any other comments or thoughts?
I don't think so at this point. So if you'll get something emailed over to us, Katie,
Sure.
we can add that for Monday.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you all.
Thanks for joining us, Katie. Colleen, I just had any other updates or current discussion in preparation for the Board of Health convening tomorrow at 1 p.m. If you have anything to share at this point, if not, then I think we're good with the public health portion.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything. The Board of Health will be, our typical going through kind of report outs, kind of talking about, the big pieces. I want to officially adopt that framework through our Board of Health, and that we've been, showing people kind of, the progression forward. So I think that's the biggest piece. And then, actually talking about septic permitting and, to Paul's point, what he's been talking about is a lot of the construction pieces that are coming in are, homes versus like large developments. And so that entails septics, and looks like we might have some variances that we need to kind of talk through and set another date for Board of Health.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
Cool, sounds good. So I think with that, then we're through our public health update portion of our agenda. And so now we can move into that recovery update. So Janine and Sarah, I know you guys are up leading the recovery group. So if you would like to walk us through the identification and collaboration of chairs and leads for committees, and maybe a debrief from City Council last night, and what our next steps are on the county level. So if you would like to walk us through that, that'd be great.
Yeah, do you want me to jump in, Sarah, or do you want me to go?
Go for it, Janine.
Okay, so yeah, we had a good meeting last night with City Council, really trying to reach out to businesses and folks who are invested in the economic recovery impact, and also just how to respond during this time as the response and recovery sort of overlap with each other. We have put together a recovery team committee outline, and it is designed to include as many folks from diverse areas as possible so that we can get feedback and participation from everyone who's affected and impacted during this recovery process. I can share what we shared last night at City Council, just essentially stating why we began all of this work with an emergency declaration, and then had a response process, and then went into now the recovery piece. It is easy, I think, sometimes for folks to forget that this is part of a disaster. It's not just an economic impact and a health impact. We are officially under disaster with a national and state and local declarations. Because of that, it means that certain resources are available. It means a certain structure has to be in place. It means that we have objectives to both identify and work towards. So as a piece of that, the recovery team will be coming together and working on 5 core areas. One is ongoing and overlaps with that response as well, the Health and Safety Committee. Of course, we're working on testing, monitoring, the business protocols, the reopening process, and along with that is St. Vincent's Hospital, so Public Health St. Vincent's Hospital, and Dr. Lisa as medical director. And she wanted me to point out that she's not only the medical director, she's a local business owner as well. The recovery, economic recovery committee will also be focused on business resilience, individual business owner case management to help identify what those needs are, events and recreation, employment, budgeting, and funding opportunities, bringing in as much as we can into our community. The mass care component is related to continuing to meet the food needs, the individual financial assistance process that we have headed up and continue to work on, and individual volunteer needs, especially for folks who are self-quarantining and can't get out, and mental health needs. And finally, the communications committee, which is central to all of this. It doesn't help if we're all doing this work and we don't know about it amongst our own groups. So communicating with business owners, communicating with governments, municipal governments, constituents, everybody who needs to have the same common messaging and be up to date on both what those protocols are, as well as what the opportunities are, and how we can brainstorm the new ideas to keep economic recovery going and build resiliency in the process, meaning how do we make sure that we are rebuilding in a way that fortifies our economy against this happening again, that fortifies our ability to respond to a pandemic in the future, or should we see a wave of outbreaks again in the future? So strengthening as we go. And just keeping in mind that really it's an economic focus, but then also shifting to the notion that we have to center well-being. I don't know if many of you have had the opportunity to look at how different countries and different communities are responding and rebuilding. New Zealand has had a really unique philosophy, is that the economic piece is there, but the focus on community well-being, focusing on mental health, focusing on how families are doing, has been their center, and that's been a neat perspective to look at. And I think when we start from that place, we end up coming up with answers to those solutions that at first look like they're money solutions or cash flow solutions that really are deeper issues to look at. So that's the team process. We're going to be meeting Thursdays at 3:30 to work on this recovery team. There's already been some really neat work done in the community around a survey of businesses and what their needs are, showing that financial needs are huge for folks, and whether they feel like they can last 3 months, 4 months, what would sink them. So there's been some good work done. How this can bring us all together, how we can support everyone, and then come up with a new framework. I don't know if folks have had a chance to take a look at the Colorado Tourism Bureau, have come up with a new campaign called Wait to CO. And it's all about how we'd love to have you come visit, but please hold off a while. And in the meantime, here's some awesome things that you can do. You can plan your trips, you can pre-book your outings and your adventures, and here's how you can sort of build up the expectation to come back to Colorado at some point. So there's lots of opportunities, I think. And Sarah can even touch base on all the construction work that's going on this summer, which we hope will help some of those retailers and restaurants and lodging establishments in replacing some of that economic piece. So, we just have to rethink it, reframe it. Perhaps this is the summer of rebuilding and renewal instead of the summer of tourism. So I'll let you talk some more, Sarah.
Sure. I think everybody on this call has heard the the construction projects, and talking and messaging it as opportunities. But I will say too, a little more insight to last night's conversation. You know, there was not, from City Council, there was not a lot of, or there wasn't really any resistance to a measured approach and a careful approach. In fact, they denied the temporary use permit for the motorcade proposal for the high schoolers. But I believe they're going to just come back and hopefully revisit and see what, you know, what might work that everybody is comfortable with. The sticking point there seemed to be the cars going down Harrison and folks gathering and collecting down along Harrison Avenue and not being able to enforce social distancing and or being unsure about that coming up. I think it was on the 22nd. So support there from council, understanding that. And, you know, I think another, just the nuances of how we talk about this. You know, I know the meeting was opened and I think the mayor said, you know, we'll be discussing the possibility of reopening. And, you know, it's just, we are reopening. And I know everybody on this call so far, I think understands the importance of what language we are using through this. But I'm not sure I have a ton more to add to that recovery piece.
Thanks. Sarah and Janine, have you gone through the process of determining those chairs, co-chairs, leads of those recovery pieces?
We were going to wait for that. Oh.
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say, having invited city council and folks that were on the call last night and then this morning, mentioning that meeting tomorrow, the recovery meeting tomorrow, I anticipate a lot of participation in that tomorrow. And I think coming out of that, then Janine had talked about really establishing and assigning those roles.
Would it be appropriate for us to post those meetings for tomorrow at 3:30 with council participating in those?
I believe.
Has it been announced as a public?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
No, that's wonderful. I just want to make sure that we get it on our schedule so that it's there and accessible.
And Janine, I don't know. I mean, that meeting, you know, we kind of were throwing ideas back and forth between meetings in the past 2 days, but that meeting tomorrow, all inclusive, and then narrowing down to the leaders of those committees, then moving forward, really having it focused on kind of a reporting back and of course, a smaller focus group, I guess. But go ahead, Janine.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I talked to a few folks before the city council meeting last night, just to let them know about it and make sure they were aware. People participated last night, and I've already been getting emails from folks who are interested. I got one email from a person who said, lots of people have communicated with me and let me know that they think I should be part of the, and so I'm really excited that people feel willing and have the desire and the passion to participate. So I think we will, in tomorrow's meeting, be able to identify leads. I sort of have in mind, based on the folks that have spoken up and have had some interest, who might be ideal for that. So tomorrow, if we identify the leads and we identify some of the first key steps, and then my goal is that those leads get to work on identifying who are in those groups and then what their objectives are, and then we come back together and report what's going on, and then, you know, all the communication in between. But I think the recovery team meetings will focus on the economic recovery for right now, and we'll get those balls all in, get it going and get it really, I think it's we've got some key players that are going to really be central as well, that will be able to participate. And it hopefully will be a collaboration that we haven't typically done. You know, I don't know that we've had a whole lot of opportunity to really work together across all these lines. And the nature of disaster is to bring people together. And so I do think that it'll be a neat opportunity to utilize skills in different ways that we haven't as a community. And I'm just really encouraged after this morning's town hall meeting as well, this business town hall meeting. It feels like once business owners thoroughly understand the process and are really understanding that the county is there to support them through all of this, and we're all on the same page, that it's just reducing that stress level and that crisis experience that they're having.
Cool. Thank you, Janine and Sarah, for that. Mom. I'm pulling up my work session planner here. So the next thing on our list, if we don't have any other updates in regards to the City Council and Recovery Task Force meeting at this point, is to move into our elevator repair needs. So I just wanted to see if Janine and Sarah, you feel like you're good with our recovery at this point?
I'm good with it.
Sarah, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. With that, we'll move on to our next item, which is the elevator repair that Commissioner Glenn asked about yesterday. So with that, I'll let Commissioner Glenn start.
Hi. Yeah, the cost of this is not covered under our agreement. The part that has worn out could be an original part of the elevator. So total cost to repair it is $19,360. I wish we had more time, but ADA it's a requirement, and once the courts start back up full swing, we have an election coming up, we need an elevator.
Commissioner Glenn, do you know if this is eligible as an insurance claim? Tara or Crystal, would you know?
I'm not completely positive if it will be able to be covered under insurance, but I can definitely look into that and see what they say.
I wouldn't think so, Kayla. This is Crystal. That it's just, it's, I'm sure it's probably normal wear and tear. I think the elevator was installed in, I feel like maybe 1955. So I don't know that it necessarily would be covered by insurance. We can look into it, but I really don't think it probably would be.
Okay. So I think we could try to submit it under our insurance and see if it's eligible for a claim. And then if not, Crystal, can you look at that total bill? I think I sent it to you from Commissioner Glenn yesterday to get us an idea of where we can get that repair taken from.
This is Chris, if you don't mind me chiming in. If I can get a copy of the insurance policy before you actually file a claim that may be denied, I'd be happy to take a look at the policy to let you know if it looks like something that would be covered. But I agree with Crystal that it's highly unlikely that it would be, because based on my review of the document that Commissioner Glenn sent over, it looks like it is something that's worn out. It's not something that necessarily has been broken or damaged outside of regular use. So typically insurance policies don't cover normal wear and tear.
Okay.
Yeah, and if it's okay, I'd highly recommend that we get on the book to get it repaired, because we don't know what kind of backlog they may have or how long it's going to take. So then we can, if we get insurance money, great. If not, then they do want a down payment of 50% of the bill. So we can pay them that much and then see where we're at.
Sounds good. Commissioner, go ahead, Sarah.
Maybe I just haven't found the specifics that address this on here, but it says to perform the following work on the equipment. So are we presuming that this includes the equipment itself as well, the labor and the materials?
I would assume it says total contract price.
Go ahead.
I just want to make sure. Commissioner Glenn, did you speak with the company?
Not since the first time they called. So I've got the gentleman's name, and I can call him back and get more particulars as they're given to me.
Sounds good. I was wondering if, Commissioner Glenn, if you had gotten more than one bid, or if this is the only company that works on the elevator?
This is the company we have the contract with to do the maintenance work. So.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mark,
Thanks for doing that.
Mark, this is Paul.
Yes.
How did you find out that who is the manufacturer? Is it Otis or?
I think Otis is the one that built the elevator. And
Okay.
Tyson Krupp, they do the maintenance on it.
Tyson Krupp does the maintenance, but Otis built it.
Correct. I don't think Otis is even in business anymore.
Did they actually do an inspection, or was this an inspection from Northwest COG? How did you find out about it?
It broke.
Oh.
So we called them to take a look at it.
Ah. Okay. Well,
We do have recent inspections on it though.
Okay. I was just wondering. So it's broken now then, right?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Good time to be broken, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Thanks.
Sure.
So I think the next path forward is to have Crystal give us a recommendation of where to account for the unbudgeted expense and repair, and bring that recommendation to us tomorrow at our special meeting. I do have it on the agenda already, so we can chat about it there tomorrow and make a final decision on that, if that'll work for you, Commissioner Glenn.
Works for me.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, sounds good. The only other thing that I don't have on the agenda today that I wanted to just let you guys all know about is that I had sent you a preliminary resolution with all of the elected officials potentially supporting it, or have asked for their support to include them in that resolution, of continuing the senior exemption for the homestead exemption with property taxes. So if you'll all take a look at that and email me back your thoughts on that resolution draft that I had sent to you. I did send it to all of the elected officials and had talked to them in an email about, this is kind of the status quo with other counties, is that we as an elected body support the exemption for our senior community and our disabled veteran community to continue that exemption on a local level, regardless of what happens with the state. So wanted to just make sure you all had seen a copy of it and feel comfortable with it. I'd really like to get comments back on it by the end of the week, and would like to try to put that on our agenda for Monday.
Kayla, I really like it. I just have a couple of small, maybe comments and additions on that one whereas that it says Lake County has approximately 450 property owners who qualify for and benefit from the senior citizen and disabled veterans homestead exemptions.
Yeah.
I wondered if we add something, because I know Miguel had explained to me the eligibility criteria as not just as property owners, but as year-round residents. So I wonder if we put something in there to make it more apparent that this is not, you know, necessarily a benefit for second homeowners. It's for our, you know, our neighbors.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I had flagged that area in there. I wanted to ask Miguel if he felt like the estimation that I did off the quick calculation with the information I had was accurate, or how to best update that information so that we do have an accurate accounting for how big the impact will be.
Yeah, we can include also, we're receiving applications still through the end of July. And so we can also look to include the ones that are verified in that total to get a better count, a head count and a financial count as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think Miguel, if you can work on getting us those accurate numbers of approximately how many seniors this would affect, that'd be really helpful for us to put that in there. And I'd like to have a copy of that done locally and also send it on as our regional and fellow counties have sent that on to the state level to let them know that we are upholding that portion of the Colorado Constitution to honor that homestead exemption.
I really do appreciate that. And anybody who can do outreach to Julie, since she is on that committee, that I would be really thankful to you, because the financial impact, the dollars aren't a good representation of the actual impact to that community.
Right. And it seems very disproportionate that that would be the only age group or the only group of our population that would see an impact on their property tax going into a non-revaluation year.
Yes, agreed. And for most of those people, it's going to be $600 to $800 that they're going to have to source out of thin air on a fixed income. And it's just not an option, generally speaking. And I would anticipate us keeping the same criteria that's always been in place, you know, the 10 years in ownership, primary residence, over 65 as of January 1st of the year that you applied. So I think if we follow the same outlines, and when it is reinstituted, hopefully in the future, we'll have a pretty clean book to turn over to the state. And some of the checks that they had put in place were voter registration, motor vehicle registration, also checking at the state level for death certificates that have been recorded to make sure that people had not just failed to record the death certificate to keep the taxes low, keeping it in the name of the prior owner. So we can continue on with the same process, I think.
Okay, cool. I think that that's a fair thing to include in there. And I think if you could help with that information and then help with developing the process of how to do that internally and locally, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely we can help with that. And I would probably just recommend revising and making a local application that's just a mirror of the state application, and then having people, maybe a small board, to review and approve those applications. Now, what would happen is we would accept the application, begin the process, and then send it off to the state for them to verify through, you know, state records for death certificates and also some of those other checks that are in place since the last big audit of that program, which is voter registration and things along that line. Motor vehicle registration as well.
Awesome. Sounds good. So if you can help send us some help me clean that up a little bit in that resolution, Miguel, that would be really helpful. And then we can try to put that on our agenda for Monday. Mark and Sarah, do you feel like Monday is an appropriate or adequate amount of time?
I think so, yeah. No, thank you both for bringing this to light and working on it. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Commissioner Glenn, what's your thoughts?
Doesn't matter to me. I'm just curious as if I have to abstain from the vote.
No.
No, I don't think so.
No? Okay, goody.
Yep. What, can you just elaborate on that a little bit because you would qualify?
Well, this directly affects me. I'm
Oh, okay.
participating in the Homestead Act as we speak, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, Chris, do you have any guidance on that? I wouldn't feel like Commissioner Glenn would have to abstain himself, but I definitely understand his point. Do you have any recommendation?
I don't think, I mean, this isn't just specific to him. And so I don't think in terms of, you know, activities that the county engages in that may benefit him in the long run. I don't think it's a situation where he would have to abstain specific to this unless it was something directly for him instead of for community members at large.
Okay, so if it was something that would benefit him and only him.
Yeah, correct. Because otherwise, there's so many decisions y'all make that tangentially could affect each of you. You would never pretty much get anything done.
Cool. Understood. Thanks. Mark, does that clarify?
Pretty much.
Okay. Cool. So I think with that, then we're at a good point where we're through our agenda for today and then ready for our agenda tomorrow, and we'll have this ready for Monday. I'll send a follow-up email out to the elected officials and just ask for their feedback on that resolution before Friday at close of business. And if they're not comfortable putting their name on that, to also let me know that information.
Can I ask quick, and I know we're getting into the BOCC meeting, but the probation office reached out to talk to us and ask us to consider getting their improvements in as soon as possible. Of course, catalyzed or pushed along by COVID, but they had plans, so they have plans to share with us. And were we going to look at that and discuss that tomorrow or Monday? I don't remember.
I think the email I had gotten from Wendy was to add it on Monday,
Okay,
the 18th.
that's
She
right.
She had sent me over some documents and asked that they be put on our next regular commissioner meeting agenda. So I think that's the same documents you're referring to.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I will make sure that those are on our agenda for Monday.
Great.
All right. So with that, we will adjourn at 2:11. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you.